practical reasons, so they sent me a Xerox copy of this. This is on the front page of this magazine. I also wrote to Mexico asking for photographs as well as the magazines about a month ago. I haven't received any feedback yet. I don't know if they're going to get there. It's going to take more time, but this is the front cover. This is an Olmec colossal head from San Lorenzo. As to my knowledge, as late as 1984, it's still lying in the swamps. A priest king. You have African types. Notice the Nuba king. Now notice the African right next to it. Okay? So we can find living types right now that look just like those priest kings. In South Africa, same type. You see people that look like them. Notice the forehead. Notice the broad nose. Notice the thick lips. Same types in South Africa. Here's another photograph. The features are distorted, but as you can see, the features are distorted, but the African physiognomy is still there. There's a side profile of it. These are in the park. These are taken from Mexico. These are sitting right in the park, in the park in Mexico. This is in my curio cabinet. This is made for me by my good friend William Preston. Many of you know him because he reprinted the book Ancient and Modern Britain by David McRitchie, The Glory of the Black Race by Al Jahez, as well as other things. And he had a sculpture made this about 6 years ago, and it's sitting in my curio cabinet, and it's from San Lorenzo. It's about 4 inches, 4 or 6 inches tall. I can't remember. But I think he did a very good job, or the sculptor that did it did a very good job. These are priest kings. You know, it's nice because my son and daughter, I like when they go around saying Olmec. And I say, what kind of Olmec? African Olmec. Love it. Here's another head. This is from San Lorenzo. This is said to be San Lorenzo number 2. Notice the details. 8 to 10 feet tall, 8 to 11 feet tall, anywhere between 30 and 40 tons. Now remember, according to the United States customary system, a ton is said to equal what? Round figures, 2,000 pounds. This is one of my favorites. Look at that. Look at the detail. It's almost like the Native Americans made the Africans talk to you. It's almost like many of these were just done yesterday. I like to say that it's almost like the Africans, through their genetic blueprint, had a preconceived notion that somewhere, sometime in the 21st century or 20th century, somebody going to say that we were never here. I'm here. I introduced myself to the Native Americans. We're going to get down to developing the arts and sciences. We're going to build the first pyramids of its kind, just like you see in Egypt, the step pyramid as well as the true pyramid. You do not find them until you find the arrival of the Africans. And it's like the Africans said, but before we get down to scientific business, please do me one favor so that other nations cannot say that my existence was not here. Take my picture. Not only did they take their picture, they carved their picture in basalt 30 to 40 ton solid basalt rock. I'm not talking about the bedrock that you find on the Flintstones. How did they get there? This is from the African presence in early America, and they came before Columbus. What was happening? At that time, from 1000 BC to 948, the Africans, that is, ancient Egypt, whose proper name is Kemet, Nubia, whose proper name is Nahesi, and Kush, they're in partnership. They were at war with the Asians. What was happening? The Africans needed new trade routes. The trade routes were cut off. Let's go to the map. Right there's the map. Mediterranean, as well as the Red Sea, was cut off. Same thing that the Americans did, or the United States did when they went into Iraq or Iran. They cut off their trade routes. The Asians or the Syrians did the same thing. The Mediterranean as well as the Red Sea. They cut it off. So the Africans still had to trade their goods, so they needed new trade routes. So 50% of their fleet were mercenary for the Phoenicians. The Egyptians or the Africans have a profound influence on Egyptian, on Phoenician fleets, their ships. The Egyptian ships were the effective Greek ships, profoundly influenced the Greek ships, Phoenicians, Romans, etc. They needed new trade routes. So in partnership with the Phoenicians, they came east of the Mediterranean, they got caught up, as we are told, in those currents. We talk about those natural currents that you see. These are worldwide currents. This is from what I understand, the United States Oceanographic Survey. These are These are worldwide currents and winds. Here's Cape Verde, Mary Island. These are natural currents that automatically take them into South America. We are told that they got caught up in these currents, and that's how they got involved in America's first civilization called Olmec. That's why how they were caught up in that first, how they were caught up and how they landed in America. Natural currents, Cape Verde, Canary Islands, Senegambia, and the South Equatorial Current. And you see the winds take you right into South America. Remember, at that time, it was America, not just Mexico or Central South America. Don't let nobody short-term you. Very important. Here's archaeologists working on some of the heads. Notice the fine details in the carvings. This is one of my favorites. Look how that light hit that African priest king. It's almost like he's talking to you. As I said earlier, it's almost like the Native Americans carved these yesterday. Rock corduroy, as Asia Hilliard called it. Rock corduroy. Look at it. Look at the fine details in the nose, the thick lips. Now what's happening is that you have one of the leading archaeologists of Mesoamerica, Michael Coe from Yale University, can't deal with the African factor, cannot deal with the African genius, cannot deal with the African features. So he says that the reason that they were broad nosed, thick lips, and the reason why they look so, in his words, Negroid, is because the Native Americans did not have sharp enough tools to make the lips thin and nose much pointier. When you can't deal with the African factor or the African genius, you make up all kind of excuses. Sheer narrow-mindedness, stupidity, and arrogance, plain and simple. Because it's not just the heads. It is not just the Ethiopian braids. As you'll see later on, 13.5% of African skeletal remains were found in the ruling class, not the common, but the ruling elite class of the Olmec grave sites. Side profile. Notice the strap. According to Dr. Ivan Ransurma, one of these hands were flattened and served as an oracle, and that you had a hole in one of the ears, and a long tube was running from the ear to the mouth, and it served as an oracle, and the priest would go behind the head, and would talk to the people. It always operated as a shaman. This is nicknamed Joe Louis, the famous boxer, because it said it resembles Joe Louis. Notice the lips, the thick lips, the broad nose. That's what his nickname. We do have a name for his head. This is called El Rey. El Rey in the Olmec language means the king. Remember, go back to your history. Re is the Greek form of the ancient Egyptian Ra. See the linguistic similarities? Repeat that. Re, the Greek form of the Egyptian Ra, the name they gave to the sun, as a source of creation, not as a god that they worship, a source of creation, energy of creation. All life sustains, all life lives by way of the sun. Vitamin D, very important. How do we get the date 948 BC? For the first time in science, they introduced what was called radiocarbon data. And what happened was they was able to test some wood platform. They were able to test the wood that was stuck beneath some of the heads, right? Below the heads. You can't carbonate wood. You cannot carbonate wood, but they were able to test the wood that was stuck beneath the head. You can only carbonate dead things that once lived, like reptiles, human beings, amphibians, etc. And it came up with a date of 814 plus or minus 134 BC, which was rounded off to 948 to 680 BC, that we have the arrival of the African presence as well as the African genius in early America. America's first civilization. I'm not making up the dates. If you want to look at it yourself, it is in Science, volume 126, July 12, 1957, radiocarbon dates from La Venta and Tabasco. This is the first scientific means of discovering a date of dead things that once lived. Okay? That's how we came up with the date. Here's the article, printed by the scholars, the experts in the field. I'm on here researching, giving the information back to you. 948 BC. African genius, African factor in America's first civilization. This is very important. Very, very important. Now, I want you to understand here, this is from Newsweek magazine. Why they couldn't deal with the African genius. You have to see this. A little small caption. Let me focus. I want this nice and clear. It's a little small caption. Question. The Nubians from East Africa sailed on Phoenician fleets to the Western Hemisphere in 1492, or rather before 1492. Answer. Sculpture dated 800 BC, found in Mexico, has African features. It is good but not conclusive evidence. Let me read that again. Newsweek magazine. When you can't deal with the African factor, you make things up. The Nubians from East Africa sailed on Phoenician fleets to the Western Hemisphere in 1492, or rather before 1492. Answer. Sculptures dated 800 BC, found in Mexico, has African features. It is good but not conclusive evidence. This is all they print and they leave you hanging. They never mention the Ethiopian braids. They never mention the skeleton remains. They never mention the hundreds of terracotta baked clay figurines that was found, okay, that has the coloration, the head texture of African people. None of that was never, ever mentioned. They never mentioned the rituals, the symbolic imagery, none of that. They just put this caption in here and then leave you hanging. But you have to understand why they did it. Go back to Newsweek. Fall winter issue, 1991. They already identified you as slaves replacing the Native Americans. They redefined you already. They set you up in October. Remember the article? It was Cleopatra Black. That's the article came out of. Then fall winter issue, 1991, front cover. Africans are slaves. Can't deal with the African factor, and you have to understand why. You were honorary members of that first civilization. To me, it seemed like this brother did not want to get his photograph done. Did not want any cards done. He looked like he was just a bad dude. Look at him. He just looked like he just did not feel like being bothered that day. And they said, well, look, we're going to carve you anyway, but we're going to carve you the way you look at that particular time. And it seemed like that's what they did. But it seemed like he just wasn't in a good mood. Even on envelopes, University Press of Colorado was sent to me an invitation to the tour of the ancient cities of Mesoamerica. Of all other pictures, what's on the front cover? An African priest king. On envelope. So you see that the African is ubiquitous. He's in the diaspora. He's exuberant. He's everywhere. When you see it from an African-centered perspective. If you don't see it from an African-centered perspective or an African frame of reference, you get lost. You get lost. You get confused. You got to take all of that information, and I've been doing this for the last 5 years. That's how I was able to put these slides together. Take all that information and show the African throughout the diaspora. He's ubiquitous. He's everywhere. You know, Roy S. came out with a song a couple years ago. Roy S. ubiquitous. Everywhere. African genius. Even on an envelope. Sent to me by the University Press of Colorado. This is an artist's conception of how possibly the Native Americans transported these 30 to 50 ton massive colossal heads from 80 miles away from the quarries to the other side of the river by way of raft. This is an artist's conception. This comes from Time Life Books. I like that because it gives you an idea of how they may have done it. Remember, they were transported 80 miles away, 60 to 80 miles away, and then placed on ceremonial platforms on the other side of the river. The material for that, the rock, this came from the Tuxtla Mountains of Mexico, and this was carved from a single block of basalt rock, almost like a geometric shape. They had to cut a single block and then transport that. Now, if you look on the next page, it says, and it just goes to show you from a Eurocentric perspective how they just can't deal with the African factor. The next page of that says, the reason that it's square, the broad nose and thick lips, and this is a quote, is because the Native Americans did not want to damage the colossal head when it was being transported to the ceremonial platforms. In other words, that once it was placed on the ceremonial platforms, the Native Americans was going to change the features. Sad. This is what they said. I mean, the features are so identifiable, so then you got to make up all kind of excuses. And this is what they said. They're taking this, in other words, they're speaking for the Native Americans. That this is what they did. And then they put in parentheses and get themselves out of trouble, presumably. See, the English language, the power of work.
Alright, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the part 4. Again, part 2 is much shorter because I had a little bit of stuff to do. But I hope you guys is learning something today. Okay? Especially my people. Stay tuned for part 4.